I think when most people sleep, they dream. And they sometimes remember, sometimes they don't. I don't usually remember any of my dreams. Most men have had wet dreams where they actually ejaculate sexually. I've never had a wet dream in my life. And I can't sleep right now. So I'm going to go to Capitol Hill and tell you a little bit about some of the people that I've known for decades. And I'm going to tell you about their iniquity. Yes, I am. And when I ride the buses in Washington, D.C. and the subways, I listen to music out loud. Unfortunately, most people don't mind, especially if I play go-go, because go-go is the official music of Washington, D.C. But I'm going to go on up to Capitol Hill right now and maybe listen to some JYB on the way. And if you don't know what JYB is, then you don't know DC Go-Go. And if you don't know DC Go-Go, you certainly don't know what the Soul Searchers were or who Chuck Brown was. And if you don't know that, you need to learn that before you're ever allowed to talk to me in your life, ever. Thank you. Let's go. Okay, so here's the deal, right? I'm just chilling up here on the steps of the Capitol Dome, right? The lighting is terrible, to be honest with you. But I want to come up here to show you what the United States of America is like. You could actually come here and sit on the steps of the Capitol Dome at night. And you can go inside during the day, too. I met some folks back in 2019 who were from a Native American reservation or indigenous peoples lands, which actually is where we stand. And I would beg to say that I'm friends with the chief of the Nansemond Nation. Hi, Keith. How are you, if you're paying attention? Anyways, my friend Stuart James and his friends from Spirit Lake Reservation in North Dakota came here to visit. And when I was showing them around, they were like, how close can we get to the building? I was like, man, if it's open during the daytime, you can go inside. When I took them to the mall, which has a large grassy area around the Washington Monument, they asked if they could step on the grass. I was like, of course you can, man. So it's nice to be from the area here and to teach people about the freedoms that we have. Quite honestly, my friends that are Native American or indigenous or, you know, whatever name you want to call them, those are not names that they would go by because those are English terms, which is Anglish, which is Angles, Saxons, and Jutes, which are tribes of people that are ruthless and evil. And so I'm going to tell you real quick something about that, and then I'm going to tell you something about Reston, Virginia, where I grew up. So I read quotes from important people, and I cannot remember if it was from Confucius or Musashi. I think it was Confucius, but it might have been Musashi, and please forgive me if I'm saying their names incorrectly. However, it said something like, it's very difficult to find a black cat in a room with no light, especially if there is no black cat. There's a club here in Washington, D.C. called the Black Cat. It's got a new location. It used to be in a different place, but it's up on 14th Street, as a FYI. And there used to be a homeless man who used to stand out there to get money. Oh, there goes some motorcycles. That's the police. Capitol Police, probably. And he would stand there and open the door for you, and he would say, spare a little change for the homeless. He'd say, black cat, and open the door for you and say, spare a little change for the homeless. So, props to you up in heaven, brother. I'm homeless now, too, in D.C., and I grew up about 20 minutes from here in Reston, Virginia. One of the most affluent places in the entire planet, Reston, Virginia. At least it used to be. Now it's not as much anymore. They've moved their wealth mostly other places, and some of them still keep houses there, but they don't stay there. Because most people from old school Reston travel the world, although some of us were never able to do that. Anyways, so you talk about finding a black cat in a room with no light, especially if there's no black cat. And then you start to think about old school prisons and jails where they had actually catacombs where they put people underground, sometimes for years. And me personally, I read the Bible and the Quran every day. And a couple of years ago, I used to also read the the Duncan Scottish Rites of Freemasonry, as well as the Art of War every day. I had a tent in Allen Park and it was burned up almost 2 years ago at the end of July. And I had a lot of stuff and it all got burned up. And before that, I also had a portfolio of art and a lot of paintings in there. And they were stolen, I've found out, before it was burned. So if you've got my art and it's stolen, it's not legit. Anyways, so Mark Twain wrote about Tom Sawyer and his lady getting stuck in a cave. They were little kids and they got stuck in a cave, but luckily they found their way out eventually. And I was also just reading in the Quran about being in the cave, and they didn't know how long they were in there. And then they let one person out of the cave with silver to go get food for people. And don't tell anyone your story, because if you tell their story, they won't believe you anyways. And then you'll get caught and put back in the cave and you'll never get out. So what we have in the United States is a country that's founded on slavery. And part of slavery is called buck breaking. And that's male gang rape, when the slave master would get his men, including the overseer, to rape the male slaves. That's male gang rape. So you have to have men who teach other men to get erections and violently rape other men. Another part of slavery was to have sex with the women, sometimes the slave master, or sometimes they would breed our brothers and sisters with darker pigmentation, with more pigmentation, whatever you want to call it. And then they'd sell their children. And even when the slave master would breed with his slaves, he would sell his children sometimes, probably as sick-minded as that sounds. And also the slave master would have children, and he would let his sons have sex with the slave women if they were pretty. And then he'd teach his son how evil he was by selling his son's children. And if you look at the Bible in Ezra 10, in the King James Version, which was the original time that they put this out, back around 1619, although some people say 1611. Ezra 10 speaks about separating the men from their savage wives and families. And that's what that's about. And then reading in the Quran about the cave, they'd keep people in these caves for years. And imagine if you're in a cave for years and they decide to put you in a space in the cave where you cannot see. And imagine if they put you in a cave where you cannot see, where there's men who rape you. And so there's one of the foundations of the United States. And it's an ancient practice of keeping psychotic human monsters in darkness and then creating a class of individuals that will violently gang rape other men, also women, to create evil soldiers or women to sell for the slave market. And that's a little taste of American history, biblical history, Quranic history, and also Tom Sawyer, and also ancient Pacific Rim history. Now today, slaves are carted all over the world. Private jets and diplomatic immunity and wealth of business permit that. And some people can get documents where they don't have to wait in line at the airport, and they don't have to wait in line at customs borders and checkpoints. They just flash their thing because they've got such good credentials with the government. They don't get checked and they just drive on through past all the lines. In the United States, the shortest time it takes to get one of those certifications or clearances or whatever you want to call it, identifications, is about 6 months. Sometimes it can take up to 2 years. And it costs, I think, $600. Anyways, I'm going to change perspectives here. I'm 51 years old and I grew up in Reston, Virginia. Reston, Virginia, they say, was founded by Robert E. Simon, who sold his property in Manhattan, an entertainment building, for $14 million. He decided to buy a farm in Virginia, right outside of Washington, D.C., and build a new community, a place called Reston, which is Robert E. Simon Ton, Reston, R-E-S-T-O-N, Reston. And if you go to Lake Ann Plaza, you can see a statue of Robert Simon sitting on a bench. He passed away a couple years back. Everybody in Reston reveres Robert E. Simon. But Reston, Virginia is not actually a city or a town. However, It is a place with public amenities, and it's one of the only subway stops on the entire DC metro area with a bathroom. 4 bathrooms, and they don't have a code to get into them. So that's Reston, Virginia. It's also the hotbed for the internet, where the internet started. Believe that. It's an international military area, international diplomatic area. A lot of people went to Reston to kind of converge back in the 1970s and late 1960s, and somehow I ended up there in 1976 at the age of 4. Reston, Virginia. And I thought I had lots and lots of friends in Reston, Virginia. And we'll see over time if I really do. I've been very vocal and very rude, very rude to a lot of people since I've been homeless these past 3.5 years. And I know that people who love me will forgive me at some point and converse with me again and have dialogue and be my friend. And other people will not, and that's fine. Because, as my friend Mark recently reminded me, your friends will change, but your enemies never will. So I'm going to give you a more majestic looking image right now for these next few moments, okay? And remember, what I do is for love. And it's for love of children. It's for service on a spiritual path that I've been following. And in the past, my work has been much variety. And I've served people with disabilities, I've served returning citizens, and I've been an adult ESL teacher, teaching immigrants how to speak English in Spotsylvania County, Virginia, right there next to Fredericksburg, Virginia. I've seen a lot. I've been on the Fredericksburg Area Autism Council, the Fredericksburg Area Council on Transition, which helps school-age children and adult children who go to school with disabilities transition into the adult life. I served on the Planning District 16 Reentry Council and even worked behind the walls for Virginia Department of Corrections in places like Lunenburg, Coffeywood, and Haynesville, which are prisons in Virginia. I also served on the Governor's Community Integration Advisory Commission, appointed by Delegate Rob Whitman during Governor McAuliffe's term, and I even was invited to the Attorney General's Conference on Reentry in 2016 in Williamsburg at the Great Wolf Lodge, and I spoke there as one of the breakout speakers. That's a little bit about me. I've helped hundreds of people directly in my work, maybe thousands directly, and many thousands indirectly with the families who benefited, with the services that I provided from the people who are not necessarily impoverished financially, but impoverished in other ways. Perhaps there's a language barrier, a physical ability barrier, an intellectual barrier, a vision barrier, even a cognitive barrier such as autism, which autism used to be defined as autism and Asperger's. Now it's just called ASD, the Autism Spectrum Disorder. It's very interesting. You can have people who pretty much you would never consider them autistic, ever. And then you'd have people who are nonverbal, but somehow know how to do things. One of the people I was a job coach for, he could not talk. The most he could work for was an hour. And I helped him get a job where he worked 2 shifts a week, 1 hour per shift. And he had a personal assistant with him the entire time. And sometimes he would only be able to work 30 to 45 minutes. And he's a big guy, and he'd just say, "I'm Nathaniel," but they couldn't really say much else. But the interesting thing about him is he could do complex math, and no one ever taught him. I recommend people really get past their stereotypes and the stupid Hollywood movies they watch. And actually, if they have a question, a fear, or a concern, talk to individuals directly. And don't rely on Hollywood speculation or rumors started by people in your community who have false intentions and negative motivations. So I live in a tent about 2 miles from here, over near the State Department building, the main State Department building at E and 20th Street. And I rode the bus over here. And on the way, I had a conversation with a woman, and her friends were here from Atlanta. And she had brought a bunch of children with her. And me and her were sitting on the back of the bus talking, and she brought up Henry Rollins and punk rock music, and I happened to know quite a bit about that because I'm old school DC hardcore. I started coming to shows here in Washington, DC in the 1980s when I was a child. Anyways, check this out. I have a heart for DC hardcore, and I have a heart for hardcore all over the world. And there's people all over the world. And we're basically, at the very purest form, kind of like some sort of spiritual monks, a holy class of people, literally holy and servants to God, all from all over the world, all different backgrounds, skin tones, languages, and spiritual practices, but we all converge with hardcore together. And DC is one of the heart places for hardcore. I'm gonna jump up to New York City, which is also one of the heart places for hardcore, with old school bands such as Judge, Gorilla Biscuits, Agnostic Front, Murphy's Law, Sick of It All. The list goes on and on and on, and it's now worldwide in every language, on and on and on. And I have a lot of questions and things, and people help me behind the scenes. You know, hippies ruined the world by drugging everybody, having parties, and then having children they didn't want, and starting a latchkey generation, and making fornication and sex workers commonplace and fun, and teaching people to get wasted and forget about their families and God, which is the most important things in life. And in doing that, our communities have become ruined. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, walk outside your door and look. And people are responsible for doing that. Things don't just happen. There are architects and orchestrators all over the world, programmers, influencers, who affect everybody, and it's planned. I know people who do that, and a lot of it's rooted out of New Zealand. The Bouchong family out of Reston, Virginia, Clay, Sybil, and Drew Bouchong, are one such family. Their father was an executive for Marlboro. And Drew Bouchong years ago said he got stabbed at CBGB's in New York City, in the neck, kicking someone out, a veteran. And he almost got cut in the jugular. Now, I happen to know that many events are staged and acted out. My question is for New York hardcore and Drew Bouchong, also known as Donut. Drew, was that a setup so you could get into New York hardcore? Because I'll tell y'all what, he runs around with some powerful people. His brother used to be a manager for Aerosmith. Even when Steven Tyler was firing people, Clay never lost his job. And if I'm wrong, but Drew bought dreadlocks and had them woven in high school. And we were sort of friends for a while, and then they kind of cut me off, most of them. He's one of them old school social manipulating families, and his father now lives in New Zealand. And I heard the story, Drew was hitting on a beautiful young woman, and then his father came in and hit on her too, and took her, and now that's his wife. That's his third wife, I think. Drew's mom probably still sits in her house in Reston alone watching TV every night. And Drew lives in New York City and thinks he's New York hardcore. So, are you? Are you? Maybe I'll see you again, Drew. We could talk about it. Or maybe someone else will talk to you about it next. Drew Bouchong, Donut. I also heard you had sex in the same bed that your father was having sex in. Y'all had like group sex together. Nasty. A lot of y'all fuckers are nasty. And I remember back in the day when Richie Brandenburg was for his first wedding, they had a bachelor party in New York City. They got a limousine. They did a lot of cocaine and got wasted. I had never been in a limousine before. All I did was smoke weed. Then they said, okay, guys, we're going to go get some hookers. And Drew and Richie jumped out and went and got hookers. And I was like, what in the fuck? Because Richie was actually marrying my ex-lady. I was dating a woman named Christina DeRosier. And I invited them over to my house to play Scrabble, a few people. But Christina left with Richie. She also got herpes from Richie. He's been giving people herpes since way back. And that's disgusting, Richie. And I'm saying this because you invited me to your house and you basically intimidated me and almost killed me, I think, with that weird mace you have covered in latex. Richie. You're working on a $100 million project just 2 blocks from your homeless friend who you call brothers till the end. And you have my art hanging in your bedroom on your wall that says BTTE, brothers till the end. Is that how you treat your brother when you're doing a $100 million project? Is that how you treat your brother when you founded the Arts District in Washington, D.C.? Noma, but you don't help your brother till the end who's an artist, yet you have my art on the wall next to your bed. So you guys should have come and talked to me and helped me, you wealthy, 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 rich, global culture shapers. Instead, you didn't. And now you've angered a sharp skinhead. Skinheads against racial prejudice, old school DC hardcore. And I'm not fucking around. And I'm here to change laws in Washington, D.C. And I've just recently started visiting the Capitol Dome after living outside the White House, literally on the sidewalk in front of it. And that's a whole other story. See y'all later.